Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the Her Story TV and the Her Story podcast. This is Getrude Matshe here in beautiful Melbourne, Australia this time. And today I am graced with the presence of yet another amazing, fascinating young woman coming to us from Melbourne. Welcome, welcome, welcome to our tribe. Please tell everybody your full name, where you're based, how old you are, and share your story with us today.
Thank you so much, Gertrude. I'm so excited to be here. My name is Taylor Alexandra Williams. That will only be my name for a little bit longer. I'm actually changing my name later in the year. I've created a new name for myself, so stay tuned. I am based in Torquay, Australia, which is just along the coastline right outside of Melbourne. It's beautiful. You might be able to tell, though, that I don't have an Australian accent. So I'm actually originally from Texas in the States. Grew up horse riding and all of the rest. I normally actually don't tell people how old I am, but I am 28 years old. And then my story. Okay, so I'll do it chronologically. I would say that there's 3 parts to my ever being written story. And the first one is where I learned independence from inherited beliefs. So I grew up in a small town in Texas, and I was always very well behaved on the outside, but I was always a very rebellious studier, actually, and not really ever taking anyone's word for it, rather always needing to find my own way or find out for myself or think about how I felt about it before I took on their belief. So I was very dedicated to school, really quiet. But then on the inside, I was so curious, and I never really respected rules. And probably, if you know me, I'm still very defiant to this day. So I would say that's probably continued.
The rules are made to be broken, right?
Yeah, that's right, right? It's like all the people who have done amazing things, they did not follow all the rules. It's so boring to follow all the rules. And so I was always the odd kid out. So I studied religion for fun. I kept a leather-bound journal that was wrapped up. It had little flaps, and then you would wrap and tie the leather string around it. And I was always so curious from such a long age. I mean, I started doing this when I was probably like 14 or something. And I was just really curious about all the different perspectives and all the different religions around the world and what people believed and why they believed that and how that informed their experiences. Mm-hmm. And so in high school, I was actually a librarian aide as a side job. And that's on the outside, me looking like a really good girl. But actually, I did, sorry, school library, I did steal some books from the restricted section in the back because I had special access.
Oh my God.
And they were back
now,
there.
What kind of books does anybody steal from a library? Now I'm curious to know what you were reading.
Oh, I know. Well, they were the books where people thought they were too radical, or maybe they were just too big to fit on the shelf, or maybe they had a little bit of nudity in them because they were talking about hippies or all these different reasons. And so, yeah, I used my sneaky access to steal restricted books. Very Harry Potter of me.
Love it.
So yeah, again, you know, I always thought to understand different perspectives, and I was so deeply interested in psychology. So actually, the first thing I wanted to be was a psychologist and a psychiatrist. And that it's so funny. Another weird thing I did was, as a kid, I would actually write letters to my future self, trying to help my future self understand the current self. So whenever I felt angry or frustrated or misunderstood, and I was like, why don't these adults understand what I'm saying? I would actually write down a note, and then I would hide it away. And it would be so that way my adult self could still understand those generational perspectives. So that was my hope for my future self. And again, like, why did I do that? I don't know. It's like, I'd never heard of anyone doing that. Or
You were light
yeah,
years ahead of your time, because time really is an illusion, right? We are
yeah,
born with all of the knowings of everything we're supposed to do in this life. And I actually believe you can teleport into the future and have a conversation with your future self if you're trying to figure things out in life. So you were just
yeah.
light years ahead of your time.
I don't know what I was thinking at that time, but I'm glad I did that.
Do you ever keep any of the letters and reflect back on them?
You know, I don't know what happened to those letters. They would have
Oh, what
gotten
a
lost in a
shame.
move or something. But I do, there's one in particular, and I was so angry. And I remember writing this letter, and what I wrote was something around, don't ever assume that you understand someone's perspective.
Mm.
And that was my then language. But now what I would add to that with now my adult knowledge is essentially, don't project your own experiences and emotions and beliefs and viewpoints onto someone else, assuming that that is also their experiences and beliefs and viewpoints. Because I
Mm.
believe at the time I felt as though people were assuming that I had not understood something, or assuming that I was some particular way that I disagreed with.
Right.
And
Wow.
so that is one that I really strongly remember.
I love that. It sounds to me like you've been a rebel most of your life.
Yeah.
Where did the anger, where did that fire come from? What was the life experience that put you on this trajectory?
Yeah. So my mom is definitely a rebel. And it's so funny because she always says, you know, whenever I was growing up, she would say, there are two things that you really need to learn in life. One of them is gratitude, and the second one is independence.
Mm.
And it's one of those things where she's so proud of me for being super independent now, but at the same time, she's like, I didn't mean for me, right? So yeah, I think I probably learned that from her. And you know, there's a lot of my extended family that I never knew and don't know. So possibly I have some rebels in the past that maybe it's in my blood or something that I don't know. I don't know. It's just always felt innate.
And natural to you.
Yeah. Yeah, that's right.
You've done some phenomenal things in your life. Tell me a little bit about what you do for business. I know that your whole drive is around empowering female leaders, female entrepreneurs. Let's just dive a little bit into your work in that arena.
Yeah, sure. So later in my life, whenever I gained my independence, I really found that really my second key learning was that you can completely change your life if you choose to do that.
Yeah.
And I think that that's something that I do carry into my current work, which is kind of helping encourage people to do things that they really want to do. And
Mm.
I really believe in people, and I really believe in human potential and inspiring courage and creating pathways. So whenever I think about what am I here to do on this earth and in this lifetime, I really think about it as creating pathways and inspiring courage. And the way that I create pathways in my work is through the strategic design work, through the service design work that I do, and different consulting and engagements. You know, I'm really actively listening to people. I do tons of interviews for my work and really empathetic understanding, to really find the meaning in what they're saying and be able to translate that into action. And then also through the work that I'm doing, as you know, because you will be a feature, getting ready to launch a new business, which has not yet been publicly named or really very much talked about. It's just being alluded to at the moment, which really will serve as a platform for women to, you know, tell their stories and have women-run businesses be elevated and promoted, and really talk about what was your journey, and the rawness of that journey as well.
Yeah.
Something that I find that I don't like. I kind of get that little feeling in a lot of modern business is the need to be perfect, or the
Yeah.
need to look really good, or say exactly the right thing, or say,
Mm.
you know, I always knew what I wanted and I had a straight line there. Or, you know, talking about the good talk and making sure you don't say the wrong thing or get in trouble. And maybe
Yeah.
that's also the rebellious part of me coming out. But I really love the rawness of stories, and I really lean into the difficult moments and change and complexity and the way that we grow, and
Yeah.
just the determination to really do the hard work. So that manifests in a lot of different areas of my work.
So what is the power of storytelling, do you think? Why should women share their stories?
I feel as though we are all so much more powerful than we actually believe, or that we are aware of. And I think storytelling is actually a medium that we can transmit that power to others. And that might be in the present moment, that might be in the past or in the future, that could be across generations. I think storytelling is a way that we've been able to feel connected to different generations.
Mhm.
But also, I think storytelling is a way to help people change and to change their mind. So I was
Yes.
recently at an event and it was around regenerative design, which is where I do a lot of work in. And we were talking through the experience with a client whenever you're doing one of these really tough projects with them. And someone asked the question, you know, what's the most rewarding part of those projects for you? And
Yes.
I just said, seeing people change their minds.
Yeah.
Seeing
Yeah.
someone change their mind is so incredibly rewarding. And I think
Mhm.
stories can do that, and they can connect people.
I love that. I just love the fact that we can shortcut another woman's journey by sharing where we've come from to where we are now. Then we don't have
Yeah.
to reinvent the wheel. Now,
Yeah.
regenerative development, that's a new term to me. We've never heard of it before. Explain to me what that's all about and what you actually do.
Yeah, sure. So regenerative is something that's becoming increasingly popular. So, you know, you'll probably start to see it come up in articles and things on LinkedIn. And I think that there are a couple of different ways that you can approach what regenerative is and what regeneration means. And
Yeah.
so the first way, which is where I generally start because it's the more, it's the easier way to start,
Yeah.
is that whenever you think about your impact in the world, or the impact of a system you're working with, and that might be a group of people, that might be a business, that might be something else. And you can think about a scale. So I studied engineering. So if you think about a graph and start in the bottom left quadrant, so the net
Yes.
negative, so that's actually the degenerative impact. So you're taking more than you give, you're
Yeah.
doing more harm than you are good. And then you follow a diagonal line up, and then you get to the center point, and that's the net zero. So that's the sustainable. So you're offsetting, you're doing as, you know, the same harm as you are good. You're giving just as much as you take. You're really just offsetting the wheel of your presence, or the impact that you have. And then you keep going up that diagonal line, and then you get into the upper right quadrant, and that's
Mhm.
in the net positive. And that means that you're actually doing more good than you are harm. You're actually giving more than you're taking. And your
Okay.
impact is actually rippling much further than just yourself and your
Yeah.
immediate sphere. So that's
Oh,
kind of the
yeah.
first way to describe it. And there's
Okay.
a few different schools of thought. So I would say if you're new to regenerative design, which many people are, I would say
Mm.
just sit with that first and see how you
Yes.
feel about it and kind of test that out in your life.
Yeah.
The
Yeah.
second stage of regeneration is actually coming back to realizing the evolutionary potential of life. And that
Mhm.
could be within oneself. that could be within a relationship between yourself and a romantic partner, yourself and a business partner, yourself and your child or a parent. That could be in a wider group or community or a business. It could really, all of these things are nested exponentially, basically. So you can just keep going up, which is really great. And so what that means is that it's not only about the impact. In fact, the impact has very little to do with it. Most of it is actually the way that you are being, the way that you are connecting, and the way that you are framing what you're doing with other people to help evoke consciousness in them and also to help build on their potential. So that's where we come back to how important it is to empower other people, how important it is to build each other up, and how important it is to really help people believe in themselves and reach their potential. Because along with us having way more power than we realize, we also have way more potential than we realize. And so it's really about finding, growing that capacity and acting on that potential with other people to create an enormous ripple effect.
I love that. I've always been of the mind that the human potential is incredible. And a lot of times we show up in people's lives almost like a mirror, just to mirror back to a person who they really are, what their capacity is, and also sometimes being an example of what's possible. Because sometimes if you haven't seen it done, you can't believe that it's possible. And for me, that's really why I love the sharing of all of these amazing stories with other people as well. Wow.
Yeah.
So I'm looking forward to playing with you and your team here in Melbourne while I'm here. Tell me, who are you looking for these stories that you're curating? Because we have a lot of listeners, we have a lot of readers who might be keen to be a part of this.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that what I feel as though we are trying to drive within the story, so specifically around the business that we're starting, is that what you're talking about?
Yes.
Yeah. So curating all of these stories for women's life stories, I'll answer in two parts. From a learning, actually, the reason why I'm doing that is from a learning that actually people often care about the why behind something so much more than the what. And so I'll start with the why. And one of the whys actually comes back to the really interesting way that my mind works and like the examples that I've given, and something that I've always been so just incredibly interested in are people's life stories. And actually illustrating those life stories and curating them through multimedia formats where you can actually feel and experience and leave behind your story and the story of other people. And so while obviously voice is so incredibly powerful, there are also so many other mediums which are so powerful, and we all communicate differently. So whether that's through art or textures or experiences or all these different senses, and how can you curate all of those different forms of stimulus to create that overall story experience? So that's something that I've always been so interested in, but I just have not yet known until now how, like, what to actually do with that, right? And how do I actually bring this to life? How do I bring that to the world? And so with my co-founder, Melissa David, who's an amazing human, you should all check her out. We really want to use those concepts to elevate women and tell their stories and help build up other women to help support that human potential that we were previously talking about. Because just the impact that we can have is so exponential if we realize it. And also, I think from a first person point of view, both Mel and I understand what it's like to not have female role models in your work, to not have female role models in your community, and just needing advice or direction, or even just to hear that someone else has experienced what you are what you are experiencing. And again, not in that perfectionist way, but in
Yeah.
that raw way, because
Okay.
that's how we are, right? Like life is raw and things are raw. So
Yeah.
telling those raw stories and just, ignoring the business status quo. Oh, that's imperfect to say, or that's,
Yes.
incorrect to say. Being defiant across all of that tradition. We don't care. We're here for the realness. And so what we'll do with those stories is actually shed light on women-run businesses. So if you are a woman who is running her own business or who has founded her own business, please feel free to reach out to me on LinkedIn. That's where I am. Give me a message. Or even women that you would want to hear from as well. And just hearing what people's stories are, because again, it's so windy and non-linear. And I think a big part of it for me is just inspiring more people to take action. And that could be women, that could be men, that could be non-binary. For me, it's having that fire and actually doing something with it and feeling as though and knowing that you have the community around you to support doing that thing with it is the
It's
type
all
of
about community,
empowerment.
right?
It is. It always comes back to that, right?
Yeah. And that's when all the collaborations come in. You're not doing things on your own. Now, define the word female. Now, with gender equality, being female can mean a lot of things. Are you including transgender women? Are you including men?
Absolutely. So the primary light that we're shedding on people are on anyone who identifies as a woman. And that could be now or ever in the past. So if you were born a gendered woman, or if you were a transgender woman, or if you are a non-binary person and maybe things have changed, like just we really want to support that female inspiration and energy in the sense that we want to support equal light being shed and empowerment, some more the feminist ideologies. That being said, we are very mindful to not be discriminatory. So we do plan on featuring men as well. We understand that while women's rights and the pay gap and women's recognition and all these things have so far to go, really long far to go. Like we're not alone. And I think that the polarity of only focusing on the one and not pulling in men would actually slow down the progress. And so that being said, like, yes, it will absolutely be inclusionary to all gender types, with the focus of trying to basically decrease that gap between women and really doing what they really want to do and reaching their goals.
Oh, that's fantastic. That is absolutely awesome. It really inspires me to see, other women who are working in this sphere, and the fact that you've got your business partner, Melissa, who connected us to work with. How challenging has it been to work with another woman? I know a lot of people avoid it. You two seem to be very lucky that you found each other, you hit it off, and it's working out really well. What has been your experience so far?
I would say, looking back on my different work experiences, working with men or working with women, I would say it really just depends on the individual. I'm very conscious not to stereotype. So I wouldn't say, for example, women are more passionate, because I feel as though that kind of feeds into an emotionally led stereotype. But I would say that it really just depends on the energy of that individual. And I've had both positive and negative experiences with both men and women in the professional and personal spaces.
Yeah.
I think that Mel and I are really lucky to have connected, which was just by total chance. We just actually found each other on LinkedIn, and then we were like, let's have a coffee chat. And then it just grew from there. So we started collabing on little bits here and there. And then Mel was like, Taylor, I really think we should start a business. I'm like, oh my God, you're right. We should start a business.
I love it.
Yeah. So I think it's actually about knowing that individual and respecting each other's boundaries and preferences and their growth journey as well. So I think it's really important that whoever you're working with, you are transparent about your growth journey and you genuinely take care and ask about their growth journey as well.
Well, it sounds to me like you found each other very organically and just hit it off, which is a very, very lucky thing to have. My business partner is based in Zimbabwe. Amazing woman. Ruth Dengwani is her name. And you know how you meet somebody who's like your missing left hand or your missing right hand?
Yeah.
Somebody who finishes off my sentences, who has the same work ethic. And yeah, we're doing some incredible things together. So that's really exciting to see women being able to work with each other and support each other as well. That's really beautiful to see. Wonderful.
Absolutely.
So
I'm glad you have that too.
So if I was to take you back to the younger you, we're now going to do some time travel since you believe in time not existing. You could go back to that younger you, that young girl who was rebelling, butting heads with everything, and give her some nuggets of wisdom based on what life has taught you. What 3 nuggets of wisdom would you give her?
I think something that I have learned the importance of over time, and you can start doing this as early as you like. So even back whenever I was, that 14-year-old self, is to listen to learn, not listen to respond. So this is something that I have increasingly given focus to and also found reward in my ability to understand perspectives and connect with other people and ultimately do more meaningful work as well. The second thing that I would say is do the work, which I was never afraid to do anyway, and invest in yourself. I think investing in yourself is something that we all struggle with, or most of us struggle with. I don't know, maybe there are people out there who are just born knowing how to do it, but I think really taking the time to do the deep inner work, and really care for yourself and invest in yourself and believe in yourself. Feed your inner self to actually achieve those outer connections and those outer goals. Those two are inherently connected. And then probably the third thing would be to listen to your gut and just make it up as you go along. I think that
everybody think that they need to have all the tools, they need to have the how in order to achieve things. You don't, right?
No, it's like
made up. You jump in feet first and you learn to swim when you get there. That's been my my life philosophy.
Yeah. Exactly. And the way that you swim might be different from the way someone else swims. And that's completely okay. And you might end up on different shores. And that's like the beauty of life and the beauty of storytelling. And I think that it's often an excuse for us to start things, and where we can hold a lot of fear is, well, I really want to do this, but I don't know how.
Yes.
And so one part of me is like, yes, well, stay tuned for our business because we will give you role models. And then the other part of me is, there's no right way. You look at people out there being like, oh, they've got it all figured out. And they absolutely don't. None of us do.
That's true.
It's especially in today's day and age where traditional ways of being and working are completely going out the window. Just, test it out, see what works, take that experimental mindset and just go with it.
And if it fails, so what? At least you tried. I've always had the attitude that I would rather die trying than regretting not having tried. So I've tried a lot of things that haven't worked out. But it's just the stepping stones to where you're trying to go, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I have recently had some conversations with some people who I'm close to around fear of failure. And, for me, the advice that I give is the only way that you can fail is if you don't try.
You don't try.
Everything else is just a part of the journey.
Yeah. Enjoy the ride. Enjoy the ride. Okay. So
easier said than done.
Now, we're both immigrants to this part of the world. What is the story that brought you to Australia? We're a long way from home. Texas. I've been to Bible, Texas.
Yeah. So far away from Texas. Part of that is on purpose. I think part of the rebellion and growing up in a small town, anyone who is from a small town knows that everybody knows everybody.
Yes.
And probably most of the people that you know are still there, doing the same thing with the same people, same place. And I'm like, I cannot do that. I won't let myself do that. So, after having those independence lessons and the whole, you can change your life if you choose to lessons, I set out in the world to figure out where I wanted to live. Right. And so I was in Europe for a while, I was in Sweden for a while, and I actually ended up in Australia on holiday. Well, a working holiday. So I was here as a research assistant for Melbourne University back when I was still doing engineering. And I accidentally fell in love with an Australian. And so I had to go back to the States. And then I came back here. And I've been here for 4 years now.
Okay.
And it's beautiful. It's great here. I love it.
Oh, awesome. So who is your biggest source of inspiration personally in your life?
So you're going to love this. It goes back to the time travel. So I live my life again in a bit of a weird, abnormal, rebellious way, which is I live my life by working backwards from the person that I want to be the day that I die. So I look at the end of my life.
Yes.
And I look at that person there and I say, if that's my idol, if that's the person who inspires me, if that's where I want to get to, then what do I need to do to get there? Basically, what are the experiences that I want to have lived through, the people who I wanted to have connected with, the relationships, the impact, the change, all of that. So that's kind of how I make all of life's biggest decisions, actually, is, if I don't do this and I look at that person, is that going to be a moment of regret?
Yes.
And then if it is, then I just push forward and I do it anyway.
Really interesting, because my very first book, the last chapter of my first book is my obituary. I wrote down everything I wanted to achieve in this life until I died. And my favorite book is by Deepak Chopra. It's called The Way of the Wizard Merlin. We were talking about Merlin earlier.
Yeah.
That book talks about living backwards in time and seeing the end before you start. And you manifest things really fast if you're clear what the end goal looks like. People say to me, Getrude, how do you come up with all of this stuff? You just seem to do things and they work. But I get how it's supposed to look at the end. And then I just reverse engineer it. And it's very, very easy when we do it that way. So it's interesting. We have a few little common threads and similarities here. I love that.
Yeah. I love that you do that. I have actually never met someone else who does that.
Yeah, I
So
actually meditate. If I'm struggling with a problem, I will go into
yeah.
meditation and I will tune into the future me. And I just ask her, how did we do this? Because I know it's all, I know it's done. The fact that's in my heart, it's in my soul. It's a seed that was there before I came. And
Right.
sometimes she pops up in my dreams as my grandmother. So my grandmother is my
Hmm.
spiritual guide, and she'll tell me all kinds of things through my dreams that actually apply to whatever I'm working on. Or I
Mm.
pay attention to the people who cross my path. It could be I'm
Mm.
standing in a bank queue and there's somebody in front of me and I strike a conversation with them. The next thing I know, there's a little synchronistic connection, or they'll say something related to what I'm trying to figure out. So the people who are around me normally give me the solutions as well. But I do,
Yes, yes.
we're born with all the knowings, right?
Yes, absolutely. And I think that another thing, just while we're kind of jamming on each other right now, that you would love, is the idea that as we go through these different development stages in life and we have these different growth periods, um, part of where we get to in a more transitional way of being and thinking and connecting is that kind of the bursting of that soul self authorship and coming to the point where we realize that we are actually only co authors in our own lives.
Yes.
And everyone around us,
Is
they are
co-creating with us.
also
Yeah.
co-authoring our lives. Yeah, absolutely. So, the
Oh,
person at the post office and releasing that control.
yeah. No, I learned that from a very, very early age. I think I was in the UK when I first tapped into it. Found myself in trouble, got myself pregnant, and just one person puts their arms around me and tells me it's going to be fine, and then I believe that, and then the next person I meet, and that's how I wrote my first book. It was called Fleeting Angels when I first published it. Well, first
Mm.
wrote it. It was a journal of all of these people who showed up like angels when I needed help.
Yeah.
And I started writing these little stories about all these individuals. And now
Yeah.
when I look back, I can actually see the dots. I can join the dots,
Yeah.
the little synchronistic events that brought them into my life. It's very, very clear that they were supposed to be there, that we were supposed to
Mhm.
meet. It's like having this conversation with you. I feel like I'm talking to myself right now.
Yeah. Yeah, I love that. And then that really does go full circle with storytelling, right?
Yeah.
Like the ability to storytell the connection of those dots and even in the moment which each of them meant to you.
Yeah. Yeah. And being present to people. Um,
Mm.
a lot of times people sleepwalk through life. You
Mm.
could be standing in an elevator and everybody's looking at the door. I'm that crazy person who looks the other way and makes everybody laugh and cracks jokes.
Yeah.
Um, it's we miss the moment sometimes because we're so preoccupied with where we're going for a
Yeah.
meeting, or we're thinking about things we're going to do when we get home. And then we're
Mhm.
not present to the people who are right in front of us. And that's where the magic of life exists. It's in the
Mm.
moment, it's in being present. So,
Yeah.
what should I have asked you in this interview? What have I missed out?
Um, well, I took some notes, so let's see. What have we not talked about? Um, I think, well, I guess I can share a little bit about what I'm focused on right now.
Yeah.
So we've talked about the different areas of the work that I do, for example, and probably that third pivotal moment in my life story. So really, the first one being around the independence, the second one being around you can change your life if you choose to, even
Hmm.
though it can be very hard. And then the third one would really just be about deep internal work to understand what makes me unique, what am I in this lifetime on this planet here to do. And
Hmm.
I think that something that actually, light bulb moment, um, this is a story of myself as I tell it in relation to a shared point in time. So COVID is really where this particular part of my story begins. And I
Okay.
know that that in itself is actually shared by many. So I
Yeah.
know that many everyone's life has changed really since this pandemic, and people have experienced that in different ways. But now I'm super curious in the collective story that we will tell years forward about how we as humanity have evolved throughout this point in time. So I really look forward to that.
Mm.
But getting back to my particular story with my deep internal study, I think what I've been working on and what I shared earlier in terms of what am I here to do, which is to create passageways and inspire courage, is actually something that I have recently gained clarity on. So right now I'm really trying to grow in patience. So I was mentioning to you before, I recently had laser eye surgery, and things force you to slow down, and like, oh, but I can't move as quickly as my business needs or whatever it is.
Yeah.
So yeah, forcing myself to slow down and really, really understand what am I here to do. So I mentioned that later in the year I will be changing my name, and
Tell me a little bit
that will
about
be
that,
changed.
because
Yeah,
names
okay.
are very, very interesting.
Yeah.
In Africa, we believe that your soul has to take to the name. When we
Mm.
name a child in Africa, they're normally named around the circumstances of their birth, the vision that the
Mm-hmm.
parents, the community have for that child. So my grandmother named two of her grandchildren Getrude. So I've got an older cousin, and her
Yeah.
name never took. So she's called Coletta. Her second name stepped in.
Ah,
Her first name is Getrude. So
yeah.
what is it about the name change? Tell me a story around that.
Sure. Yeah. Okay. So I will be dropping my current last name of Williams, and I have created a new name for myself that I will take. I'll also take my partner's name, so I'm eloping later in the year. But that name will just remain for personal life. But within the work that I'm doing with different communities and all these different areas, I'll use my new name that I've created for myself. And part of why I've done that is I have dropped Williams because I don't feel as though, as you say in your words, it has really taken to me, or I have taken to it.
Yes.
And this is something that I have a personal perspective on. I know that there are many people in the world with this last name, and I do not in any way want to taint it for anyone else. Please make up your own mind about it.
Yeah.
For me, I'm from the southern US, and I feel deeply uncomfortable having that name, knowing the dark history of that name in the southern US with relation to slavery.
Mm-hmm.
And so I feel actually deeply uncomfortable with that name. Again, like I know there are so many people in the world who have that name, so I absolutely do not want to taint it for anyone else. These are just my own personal views about that name. And so I'm very much looking forward to having my new name, which I have created. And the reason why I wanted to have not only, my partner's name, but also have my own name does come from that independence as well.
Yes.
And I also feel like names can be quite sacred. And so I never wanted a name that I didn't feel was truly mine. And so that's why I felt the need to really name myself and come up with a name for myself from myself that was not given to me by one other, rather was given to me by myself, and potentially, if you go back to the time travel, that future self.
Yes. Yes. Oh, I love that. I love that. It has to fit with your soul. It has to fit with who you feel you are being at this moment in time. What a beautiful way to end our interview. One last question. We
Okay.
went into the past. Now we're going to teleport to that future you. When you
Yeah.
finally get there and you're sitting on your rocking chair at 120, reflecting back on your life and the things you've done. If you were to have a conversation with that woman, what would you say to her?
So am I having a conversation with my 100-year-old self or
Correct.
the other way around? Yeah, okay. Um Ironically, thank you for the patience.
Okay, nice.
Yeah.
Very nice. Wonderful, wonderful, wonderful. Wow. This has been a really interesting interview. In the
So many
direction I had
ways we
no
could take it.
idea where it was going, but absolutely loved every minute. Thank you so much, Taylor. And
Yeah,
thank you to
thank you.
everybody who tuned in today. The Her Story TV is highlighting stories of women from all over the world. I believe we can change the world one story at a time, one woman at a time. If you're inspired to share your story, please get in touch with me, DM me. Let's get your story out. We're having our online summit in September, the 17th to the 26th of September. So if you feel you want to share your story on our platform, go onto our website, theherstorycircle.com, register to speak. Taylor has been persuaded to join us as well, so we will hear more of her story. But have a fantastic evening, everybody, wherever you are in the world. Thank you so much for tuning in again. And thank you, Taylor, for this amazing interview. Bye for
Thank
now,
you.
everybody. See you next time.